Welcome everyone, this is Coaching in Session. My name is Michael Reven and I will be your mindset coach today. And today we're going to be talking about critical thinking. Critical thinking is a mindset that many people don't want to get into, don't know how to get into, or have fallen out of. Common sense and critical thinking are far and few between in the younger generation today, and it's not their fault. The reason being is that critical thinking is not being taught the same way as it was. Because we live in a world where technology can make things easy, for example, what's 12 times 12? Unless you learn your multiplication and your times tables and you remember them, you're going to say, well, 12 times 12, well, I don't know that one. Well, 12 times 12 is actually very simple. 11 times 11, same thing. 10 times 10. We have our doubles. Typically, people remember those. But when we get to the 7 times 6s and stuff like that, that's when people have to start to think deeply. But some people don't even think that deeply. They go, you know what? Let me get my phone out. Let me get a calculator. And that is what they do. They bypass the ability to learn how to be and practice critical thinking. But why is this phenomenon happening? Why are we falling out of critical thinking, and why are we falling into a more lackadaisical type of thinking, a lazy thinking? Well, it is easy to think easy. When you have to critically think, you challenge your brain, you challenge yourself, and this is where people have problems because they don't want to challenge themselves. They don't want to exert themselves in a way that's going to maybe make them feel a certain way. Negative, maybe they feel inadequate. So they say, I would just rather feel good. So they feel good mentally. But that mental feel good goes into all other aspects of their life. They feel good at work, they're complacent, comfort zone, in their relationship. They might not be happy, they stay there. And all of this compounds on critical thinking. Because critical thinking, there is an aspect to it that is forward thinking bigger than what you are being told. Today, we're going to be diving into my most recent blog on how to create critical thinking. If you have not been applying critical thinking in your life, then this blog is going to be the perfect time for you. And as we come up to TUS Part 50, critical thinking is going to be a big one. And then also later this week, spoiler alert, we have group 3. It's going to be the last group for the year 2023. And we are going to be focusing on critical thinking and the aspect of critical thinking in the questions that were being asked and the questions that are being passed around in the group. Because if we cannot master or perfect critical thinking to some degree, we are just going to fall to the waysides most of the time, because we do have to be critical thinkers in order to achieve more in a certain sense. And I'm going to be talking about that all today. Let's first look at the blog and then we'll dive into that conversation. All right, everyone, if you're new to the channel, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, to share the video and our audio to help build a community of like-minded individuals. Today, we're going to be talking about critical thinking. Now, I remember when I was in 3rd grade, and I was learning critical thinking for the first time. When I was a teacher, I was in many classrooms and they didn't teach critical thinking the way I learned growing up. Not saying the way I grew up learning critical thinking is the only way. It's almost like it was a passive approach to critical thinking. It was almost like, well, if you can figure this out, then you are going to know what critical thinking is. It's almost like, hey everyone, let's go to the beach. I said, does anyone not know how to swim? Everyone raises their hand. No one knows how to swim. I say, not a problem. Everyone, if you want to know how to swim, just move your arms and your feet at the same time. Make sure your kicks look like this. Make sure your arms look like this. And you're swimming. Do you think everyone's going to learn how to swim? No. Some people might have a fear of water. Some people might want to swim with their face out of the water because they don't want to get their hair wet, or they don't want to close their eyes, or they don't have goggles. So that is going to cause more strain on the swimmer because they're trying to keep their head afloat and they don't know about buoyancy. Maybe, maybe not. So there's aspects to that that is not talked about, but yet I gave a blanket statement of how to swim. That's what they do to critical thinking in schools today. It's crazy. It's crazy because how we did it was, all right, let's break this down. Okay. If Mary's going to the well and she finds that the well is dry, what could be the problem? Okay. Well, critical thinking, we have to figure out, well, maybe the well dried up because of the heat. Maybe there's a blockage or the spring just dried up and there's no more water. Maybe they drank all the water. So we can keep critical thinking, right? We can keep going down, asking questions, but then we can even go a step further from that. We can say, well, the reason why the well dried up is because they didn't do maintenance on the well. Wells are actually something that need to be maintained. It's not just something you just dig up and it's one and done. Now, sometimes that can be the case and a well can stay supplied with water for years and for decades maybe. But we do have to understand that a well can be finite. It's the same thing as if we have a house. We built a house. Oh, we have a wonderful house. And this house is beautiful. Yet, we don't do the maintenance. We don't do the paint. We don't worry about the door jambs and the doorknobs and everything. And before you know it, 10 years have gone by. And the house has chipped paint, the doorknobs falling off. And you're not in love with this house anymore the same way that you were the first day you got it. Things are not the same. The well was not the same. The well dried up. So there's an aspect to it. And if you can compare the two, right, it's very loosely tied together how I did it. Because I want you to understand that critical thinking is almost an awareness that people don't have. And today, I want to share this blog with you because this blog is going to be talking about critical thinking in the way of how you can learn it. Now, I want you to see something. So if you're an audio listener, just listen along. But if you're a video watcher, I want you to watch this. So here in the blog, as you can see, there's no bullet points. There's no guide or no template for you to easily read and say, oh, well, these are the 4 talking points. Because I want you to apply critical thinking. You have to read it. Now, for example, for a TUS, we don't really apply critical thinking. We apply knowledge and mindset. But here you can see in the TUS part 47 that I have here, that I'm just using as an example, the 4 strategies for success. And I have them labeled. There is no critical thinking here. I'm giving you what are the 4 strategies. Now, if I asked you, well, what could be the 4 strategies to success? You might say, oh, let me start thinking. So we apply critical thinking in writing too. So I can make it very simple for you, give you all the talking points, and not really invoke critical thinking. But then I can give you a full paragraph of a blog, of an article, and you have to read it in order to find out. And I will say that people who do read this, they always say this is quite enjoyable. And it's not so much of, oh man, I got to read another blog, but it's like, yes, this is a refresher for me. Because these strategies right here are going to help you become a better critical thinker. So we're not going to get too much into the blog because I do want you to read it and I don't want to spoil anything. I do want you to recognize that critical thinking is very closely tied to mindset and limiting beliefs. So if you are a critical thinker, you're going to start to question things more. You're going to be very curious about things. You're not going to follow blindly. Critical thinking, critical thinkers are actually frowned upon today. It's the same thing as with toxic men or with masculine men who are now considered toxic because we are just operating as critical thinkers. To challenge the status quo is to go against the regime, and to go against the regime is in line of mutiny. So we have to make sure that when we become critical thinkers, we do it in a way that regardless of what the world says, we understand what we're doing. When it comes to critical thinking, like I said early on in the podcast, far and few between today. Not much critical thinking is going on. I know technology is a wonderful thing, but it has put a crutch in critical thinkers because we don't necessarily need it. We can have everything given to us. Before we can read a book, and after we read the book, we can sit there and we can relish in that book. And I'm not saying that that can't happen today, but how many people don't read books? I think I did the statistic already. 33% of people, after they leave high school, not even college, high school, 33% of people, I believe this is the correct statistic, will never read a book again. They might read some directions from IKEA or how to microwave macaroni and cheese, but they will never read another book again. 33% of people. That's a lot of people. Because if I say, well, we just lost 33% of the world's population, you will say, Jesus, that's a lot of people. Yes, that's a lot of people who are not reading. And reading is an important skill. I'm not saying that when I was younger, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to read and I love reading. I did not like reading. I hated reading. I enjoyed math. I enjoyed science and stuff like that. But when it came to reading, I was like, not my cup of tea. But during the college process, and I had to do a lot of reading, I fell in love with it. Because college is different because you're not going to do things that necessarily you don't want to do. Yes, you have to do some prerequisites. But when you get into your major, your master, or whatever you want to call it, that's more enjoyable because it's something you want to do. It is because you're there. I'm sure there's people who are there who don't like their major and they're just there because their parents are making them. Cool, right? We're not talking about your mom and dad today. We're talking about you and your critical thinking. So I fell in love with reading. And then after, I was like personal development, reading, all of that. That was enjoyable to me. But it wasn't something that I just fell in love with in high school because in school, everything is regimented. It's routined. That means I'm going to read To Kill a Mockingbird. I'm going to read The Catcher in the Rye. I'm going to read all these books that are predetermined, right? Everyone reads these books. But today, if the book goes against a certain ideology, if it goes against a certain race or culture, if it's too vulgar or too traumatizing, whatever you want to call it, why do you think they took away To Kill a Mockingbird? Because it was a white man protecting a black man. Don't want to get into it. That's a mindset OD conversation there. But critical thinking is understanding, well, what was going on, what is going on, and why is it going on? Because I can look back at 2020 when we had the pandemic. I am all about safety, making sure people are safe. Everyone is in a good place. I'm all about that. However, I understand something that a lot of people didn't understand during the pandemic is that your right, your freedom, is that your right, your freedom, your life, you only get one. The moment you relinquish your freedom, it's going to be hard to get it back. The moment you start to sacrifice your time for other worldly gains and stuff like that, it's going to be hard to get it back because time, we cannot get it back. We have a finite amount of time. We can get all the money in the world. That's abundance. That is in abundance. But time is not. Time, we do have to be very clear in what we're going to achieve and do. Yes, I'm not saying that you have to be 100% and push every single day and not be on your phone and not watch Netflix and movies and stuff like that. Enjoy life. Enjoy life. But what I am saying is that the people during the pandemic, as the example, willingly said, okay, all right, we had to stay inside. Okay, not a problem. We got to flatten the curve. Okay, not a problem. We can do that. I mean, I'm a team player. So I said, all right. Dr. Fauci had came on. He was like, all right, we're going to do it for a week or 2 weeks or whatever it was. And I said, okay, I can do 2 weeks. It'll be a vacation, I said. 2 weeks happened. Did some restructuring of the business because things had changed. Because we're no longer doing it in person. Everything was going to be virtual. Doing a lot of that, getting everything ready. Now, what had happened was the 2 weeks have gone by. And they're like, yeah, it's going to be about 3 months now. And I said, whoa. That's not going to happen with me. 3 months of my life. No, I'm not going to sacrifice that. I don't care about what curve. I don't care about it because I was going out during that time. And I'm sure people are going to be like, oh, you're crazy and you're inconsiderate. That's fine. But I was a critical thinker because we can fast forward to 2023, 2024, whenever you're listening to this podcast. And you're going to say, well, it was a hoax. It was a sham. We didn't need to be locked down because you didn't need to be locked down. But for the people who questioned, why do we have to be locked down for so long? Why are we not flattening the curve? Why is the curve not being flattened if everyone's inside? So then people now got this fear of, well, it doesn't matter where I am. I'm going to get sick. So if I'm in the house, I'm going to get sick. People were wearing masks in their own house. I've seen it with my own eyes. People drive by themselves in their car with a mask on. I understand if you want to go to a grocery store, you have a mask on. There's a lot of people there. But by yourself with a mask on. I said, okay. This basically just created a hysteria. So people are no longer critical thinkers. People no longer say, you know what? I'm going to look at everything, the science. I'm going to look at the real world, my surroundings, the people around me. And I'm going to say, is what I'm doing beneficial? We might not be able to see it, but you can ask yourself that question still. And people will say, oh, I'm a hero. I'm wearing a mask. Oh, yes, this protects me and things like that. But when we show you the studies, when we show you the facts and the data, you don't want to pay attention all of a sudden. Oh, no, that's wrong because we were told this. Critical thinking is not about being told anything. Critical thinking is about understanding that you have an opportunity for growth, that you have an opportunity to dive deeper and not just stay on the surface level. If someone tells you something, that's the surface level. If you go deeper and you dive deeper, that's going to be now you're investigating. But then when you question what you investigated, then now you're going to be critical thinking. So we do have to question the narrative. We do have to question everything, especially today in a world of misinformation and of information that is correct that is being labeled as incorrect, and with opinion and with a belief that people can be a certain type of person and they can just make things up. It's like they live in a fantasy world. Critical thinking has gone out the window because critical thinking is based on facts. Critical thinking is based on an understanding of an underlying foundational set of knowledge and skills. And it's a skill that many people lack. We can begin to change. We can begin to make some changes. We can begin to be critical thinkers once again. It's not going to be a walk in the park. It's going to be maybe boring for people. It's going to be you getting a book and you asking questions. Parents, if you have a young child right now, you would do them a great service in their life. You don't have to buy them anything. If you don't got money, don't worry about it. If you got money, it doesn't matter. You can do them a great service today by asking them critical thinking questions. Invoke a critical thinking skill. Now, what questions you ask them is up to them. If you give them a situation, that's even better. I saw a video. It was a mom. She had her 4 children around the table. They were talking about budgeting and what they can afford, and this is how much they get paid, and et cetera, et cetera. And the kids were like, we don't have enough money. And they were trying to figure out, well, what can we do instead? Critical thinking. But let's take a look at some critical thinking questions. So I'm not just leaving you up in the air how to ask these critical thinking questions. All right, so this is going to be just a set of 15 questions that a parent and a teacher can ask children to invoke critical thinking. Number 1, how do you know this? 2, how would your perspective be different if you were on the opposite side? 3, how would you solve this problem? 4, do you agree or disagree and why? And then to continue to ask why. 6, how would you avoid this problem in the future? Why does this matter? 7, 8, what's another way to look at this issue? 9, can you give me an example? 10, how could it have ended differently? 11, when will we be able to tell if it worked? 12, why did you ask that question? 13, who would be affected by this? 14. What can this story teach us about our own lives? 15. Why is this a problem? These 15 questions here are going to be the starting point, and then you can start to get into the deeper questions, the ones that I talk about in the blog. Because critical thinking is not so much of, I'm going to be asking a question and you're going to be figuring out an answer. It's almost an understanding, because I don't even have to ask myself a question to critically think. It's easier if I ask myself a question, but I can just say, that's interesting. That right there was critical thinking. That is interesting. I am being intrigued by what you have just said or what I have learned. And now I'm diving deeper into it mentally. I might be talking out loud to someone about it. But one of the things I learned, and I had a guest on, he's a early childhood educator. We talked about all of this. He's all about early education, helping kids be critical thinkers. Hey, that's interesting. Why did you say that? Similar to what we just said here in those 15 questions. That is to start. And then it evolves into, do you believe what you're being told? Why is the world the way it is? Because now we're asking the questions, the deep questions that are meaningful to most people. Why are you not successful? Why are you not trying? Why are you giving up? Why do you have limiting beliefs? Diving deep and unraveling the yarn that was tied in a knot. We have not been wound correctly. So it is our duty today as adults. It is our duty as parents to make sure that our children do not have to go through a life of critical thinking and then no critical thinking and then thinking in a way that's anti-critical. And I mean, it's an interesting world we live in. And this podcast, I mean, if you listen to episode 1 all the way to today and on, we ask those deep questions. I don't bombard you with them because I want you to understand that this is personal development. I do have to ask you some questions and I do have to know your reasoning. But if I do not know your reasoning, for example, we never spoke before, you just listen, perfectly fine. But if you want to ask deep questions, right, you can read these 15 questions on the internet. You can find more questions. But yet, just because you have practiced critical thinking, it doesn't mean you're going to apply critical thinking. And this is what this blog is for. Not only teaching you how to create critical thinking, but also how to apply it in your life. So in closing, critical thinking is going to be one of those things that is almost like a lost art form. We don't ask critical thinking questions anymore. What is happening in the school is at a very surface level. It's a very quick thing. It's the same thing as I said with the example of, I'm going to teach you how to swim, move your arms and your legs. That is not teaching someone critical thinking. Just because I'm asking critical thinking questions, it doesn't mean the child understands that they're critical thinking. We do have to make it black and white. We have to make it clear. This is what critical thinking is. And we have to challenge them. We have to say why. And if they say why, they're challenging us to answer them, because now they're maybe critical thinking and they're trying to understand things for the first time. Because yes, it could be very difficult to answer all the questions because you have your own life and you have to work and you have to cook and you have to clean and you have to do all of these things. And it can be difficult. But yet, if you can apply critical thinking into your life, you're going to find a joy for it. You're going to find that you are more curious and that you are more eager and you're more ambitious, all because of a simple aspect of critical thinking. And that aspect is diving deeper into a situation, diving deeper into a problem, a concern, a habit, and then figuring out, well, what could be a possible cause? What can be the solution? Just how we started off this conversation today, talking about how I learned critical thinking in 3rd grade, about just reading a passage. From the passage, I would have to dive in deeper and ask questions on that passage or about the passage. And it's almost like made up. Imagination also plays a role in critical thinking. So there's just so much that is stripped from us when we're younger, because we are not meant to be critical thinkers. Even though we're trained to be critical thinkers, we are just meant to do. No wonder why they said, you know what, let's get away with the regular system of teaching and let's give them more standardized testing. Because testing is just simple work. There's no critical thinking involved. It's A, B, C, or D, and maybe E, all of the above. And that doesn't involve critical thinking. And you do have to ask yourself now a critical thinking question. Why do you think they do that? My name is Michael Reven. I'm a mindset coach. If you have any questions, you can email me coachinginsession@gmail.com. I'll see everyone on the next episode of Coaching in Session. Until then, everyone take care.